Hello.
Hey, Jack. Hey, how you doing? Do you go by Jay? Sorry,
Hello. I'm sorry I was on my speakers were in mute, so like if you said
no,
something I wasn't able to
no
hear.
worries. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. So
Hey, sorry, you go by Jay, right?
yeah.
Or yeah, okay, cool. Hey, Jay, good to talk to you again.
Yeah,
It's
likewise.
been a while.
Yeah.
If at one point I drop off in the next maybe 10 minutes or so, I'll rejoin in my mobile just because I have limited internet in the airport.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Do you mind while we wait? I ask. I'm very curious, like. A very brief, and it doesn't have to be now, but like a brief day in the life of a maintainer like yourself, Jay. You work for a company, an employer that allows you to contribute full time. I assume, or not full time, but the portion of
Yeah,
your responsibilities. I assume, yeah.
yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of really differs. Uh, like most of the time, I'm just going through Slack and GitHub issues and GitHub comments, working through all PRs and making sure that I respond to anybody who is facing any issues with Gatekeeper, and that's pretty much my day. Uh,
Gotcha.
yeah, and then like parallelly, I am also working on design, like feature design ideas or implementation details based on the designs that we already have finalized. Uh,
Okay, okay.
so yeah,
So you
that's
are fully dedicated to the gatekeeper or multiple projects?
um. So for now, I'm working on Gatekeeper. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Rita.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good.
Well, glad the timing of everything finally worked out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank it. Appreciate that. Looking into it.
Yeah, is this your first time on the call?
No, Reed, it's been a while. Last year I joined a couple times, and then I kind of fell off.
So, sorry,
No, no, it's okay.
hard to keep track.
You also don't have a face. Not
Eh,
showing. I'm in the airport right now, so sorry for the
oh yeah, no worries.
background.
We
Okay.
do have somebody new, I think. I haven't seen Victor before, so
Yeah, I just passed my, well, not just, but the last year passed my CKA, CK80, and CKS, which means I'm a beginner. So just trying to understand more of the different part of the Kubernetes and maybe eventually code base. I'm a generalist, so I don't even try to be a developer, I guess, but I still like to understand the code base where possible. And in this case, OPA is interesting because I understand, OPA being fine-grained authorization could rely on OPA. I'm just trying to understand what gatekeeper is to OPA. That's why I'm here.
Let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, most of the time I try to not to interfere with conversation between experts, just listen. Yeah, I definitely appreciate. Yeah, if there's any question come up. One thing actually, I was listening to David Itz talking about API machinery. He mentioned several things about next level of abstraction. I don't know you seen that interview or not. I actually have the article. I'll post it in the chat. So that's pretty interesting because I'm into the abstraction, which helps me understand a lot of things without getting into the details. And yeah, I think if you maybe after you finish your agenda, maybe that if you can maybe from your perspective on the OPA side, what could be the next level abstraction?
Also, if you're new to Gatekeeper, I guess maybe the best place to start is just this gatekeeper.sh website that we have, and definitely please let us know if you have questions or we can improve anything.
Okay, you already wrote it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure you know that OPA is in another ecosystem called OpenID Foundation. There's actually a discussion about multiple authorization. It's called SIG Auth10, I believe. It's talking about multiple different authorization engines. OPA is one of the authorization engine being discussed there.
Got it. Yeah, definitely authorization is pretty big in OPA, and just to clarify, right, for Gatekeeper, it's a OPA emission controller, emission web controller. So it's meant to handle the validating and also mutating aspect of the entire request workflow. It does not touch the authorization piece.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good intro. Shall we start with the agenda? I see
Yeah.
Alan has a topic.
Hey, Rita, yeah. And I might have like a few minutes left on the airport Wi-Fi, so I'll switch over to my mobile if I get cut off. But um, I I don't know if the issue is tied to. We could talk about the issue that I opened, but as a workaround, I mentioned in the issue that I was able to. So the scenario is I have two gatekeeper instances running in a cluster to isolate the functionality of one of them doing the validating and the other doing the validation by the operation life. And it's been working fine for several versions of and releases of Gatekeeper since we started this maybe two years, maybe less than 2 years ago. Very soon after mutations went beta, but don't quote me on that. It's been working. The last release right now that it's working on is 3.15.x, and we have efforts to upgrade to 3.18, just to align with some of the new versions that we're releasing. And in this upgrade testing is where I ran into this issue that I posted in that GitHub issue. And the workaround seemed to have at least stopped the mutation instant from crashing. So Gatekeeper ultimately starts running with both the operation webhook and mutation flags. However, when I deployed the actual Gatekeeper validating Gatekeeper, and it boot up and ran successfully. However, when I went to apply the constraint, I started to see some funky errors, and then it wouldn't recognize any constraints that I wanted to apply against those templates with those errors that I sorry, like with our firm, we can't like post directly into GitHub and all that. So I had to take a screenshot. I don't even know if that's good, but I don't see any customer sensitive data. And I've done a ton of testing like outside of our clusters with that same version, same version of Gatekeeper, same version of Kubernetes, similar kind of well, I haven't done the isolated operations, but in a single instance with a mutation webhook and the webhook operation, everything works with the right releases. Constraint templates and constraints get recognized and everything's happening. However, in our internal clusters, for some reason, I can't get past these two errors that won't recognize it. It looks like it doesn't want to register the constraint template for whatever reason. And one thing I did do to isolate the two instances running on a cluster with the same operations is I just used one instance with the dual, or not dual, but two operations, the mutation with the regular operation, weapon operation. And it's still walking on, so can't register for any. And I use constraint templates from your library. So I thought maybe isolate the one we goes internally and it's still complaining. And any pointers, or let me ask two questions, like, is that a valid, I know Jay, you questioned why I was running two instances of Gatekeeper, but from the documentation, we understood separate operations, isolate the responsibility. So that's been working and we continue using that. And then two, like any pointers and come across these type of errors, maybe pointers on how to further troubleshoot. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I do have some idea why this was introduced. Uh, it's because when we introduced enforcement points, uh, the OPA client was set up in a way that if there are no enforcement points that are requested to in the OPA client, then it wouldn't initialize. And enforcement points are included based on the operations defined on the gatekeeper port. So maybe we need to figure out another way uh, to initialize OPA client without relying, like when the enforcement points are not mentioned, or when uh, only mutate is uh, only mutate is needed for the operation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm sorry, your voice kind of broke off in between a lot more, so I couldn't hear you.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Um,
But I hope.
yeah, I'm trying to understand if because of the way that I have now configured the, our gatekeeper instances with the two operations to work around this issue, if it's the reason why I can't register constraint template any
Oh
longer.
no, 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 no.
You don't think that's related?
Yeah, no. I mean, setting only one mutation operation independently should work fine. I think it's
Okay.
just a bug in the code.
Right. That's okay. But do you see the two errors in the Google Meet of Google Docs that I posted? And that's happening when I first apply a constraint template resource, right? Custom resource. And it takes the resource. I can do a get constraint template, but it says one, I see that error in the logs, but it also says in the status field created false versus
Sorry, what does it say in the status field?
created false versus created true, where I've seen it in the past, the status field of a constraint template would say created true.
Yeah, I'm looking at your screenshot. I've seen this error in the logs, but it always is like in my experience, it has remained transient and gets resolved, and then eventually the template is added to the watch registry.
Alan, do you mind sharing a sort of like share your repo steps with us? One with a constraint template constraint on a older version of Gatekeeper. Tell us how you actually deployed your Gatekeeper, both validating and mutating webhook. And then I assume you just basically replace the Gatekeeper version, right? By bumping the tag. Is that what you did?
Hey, Reed, I only caught the last part of that because I got kicked off of the the
Yeah.
computer.
By the way, your voice is also going in and out. Like I just wanted to confirm that you didn't change anything from your deployment, right? Like all you did was just bump the Gatekeeper
Yes,
image tag or
that
Helm chart.
I did. Yes, exactly. I mean, I did bump the CRDs to the CRDs that come with the newer version. But outside of the image, that's it.
I see.
Everything else. And I mean, and then that's when I saw the mutation instance fail, and I just added the operation of mutation webhook to work around
Okay,
it.
so do you mind sharing your deployment YAML or Helm chart, like however you deployed it? It just if you could share that so we can repro it, we can reproduce the problem, that would be really helpful.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Let me
Just
figure
like
out.
you said, the way you're deploying, like
Yeah,
one is validating, one is mutating separately.
yeah,
We don't normally test that. We usually test like everything's running together as one
yeah.
single controller, right? So share whatever way you deploy so we can reproduce it, and then we can figure.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep, sounds good. And just to reconfirm, I think Jay said yes, but the way we are deploying it is the valid setup. It's just you're not testing it. Okay, cool.
I
And
mean,
we
it
have,
should work, but
yeah,
because
we
we're
have
not
not traditionally seen multiple gatekeeper deployed in single like cluster.
Yeah,
So
yep, yep.
well, to be
And,
clear, we have explicitly said multiple gatekeeper as the validating controller. That is not supported, right? But you're not doing that. You're just separating the
yeah,
validating controller from the mutating controller, right? So in theory, that should work, but we
yeah.
need to see why it's not.
Okay. So even my workaround attempt is not going to be valid at the moment, right? Because let me just be clear on that, and maybe I didn't come through earlier. The workaround from a crashing gatekeeper instance that's trying to run just as a mutation gatekeeper, my workaround from the GitHub issue is to add the operation webhook to it, so it thinks it's also a validating gatekeeper, so that it can do the enforcement new client building. However, my second instance, the true validating gatekeeper, I still need that to be the one that processes the validating request. So it sounds like that workaround is not going to be a true workaround if I can get these constraint templates to register until maybe the GitHub issue is further triage diagnosed and we have a way forward to isolate those processes.
I could be wrong, but if you're adding the webhook operation to two different webhooks, which is what you're doing right now, right? It's like for the validating operation, I think that the two webhooks are the two controllers are going to kind of fight each other
Yeah,
because they're both watching on the same.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't
So
think,
that's
yeah.
a good workaround. No, okay. Fair
But
enough.
shouldn't eventually the validating request be transferred to only one endpoint out of the two
Yeah,
services?
the mutating webhook wouldn't actually, actually call the validating function, right? Like that part we know is okay. But remember, the code itself has a
Is
watcher
watching.
on
Right.
all the same resources,
Yeah.
right? That's the problem. So, and the
Right.
watch will run regardless if you're intercepting the request or not, right?
And in that case, like as a watch, two separate instances watching the same resources, will it be duplication, or you're saying one's going to pick up some, the other's going to pick the rest?
The problem is that they might fight each other, right? When the reason why it's okay for multiple pods or gatekeeper pods to do the same watch as part of the same validating webhook is because
Yeah.
they have sorry, the first one that works will basically create a resource that says, hey, I am the one that is watching that constraint template or constraint. That's what we mean by status, right? When you have that controller as when you have that pod as part of the mutating webhook, that's where things are gonna be unexpected because that's not part of the same webhook, right?
Okay. What is that field that it tells the
Yeah,
other gatekeepers that I'm the like active
right,
gatekeeper, I
right.
guess?
It's let me send it to you.
Yeah. Can you put it in the Google Docs? I won't have
Yeah,
this chat
I can.
available. Yeah.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess we'll wait for you to provide more
Yep.
information. I guess
Yep.
we can go to the next topic.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, for the next one, I needed. So I'm working through this doc, and I think it's like 80 to 90% complete. I'm working on a couple of things uh, that I need to finalize upon, but like I had some few questions that I needed to sort out in order to uh, make further progress, and one of which was whether or not it should be a cluster scoped CRD versus namespace scoped CRD for establishing connections. And that essentially the decision boils down to who might own the resource, and do we see a mechanism in gatekeeper itself where we need it to be isolated by namespace. um, so yeah, that's the basically two questions I'm looking answers for.
Yeah. Can you refresh my memory? Because since it has been a while,
Yeah, so
what were the latest? What was like the latest concerns and pros and cons of cluster versus namespace?
So I don't think we discussed this in depth ever, like pros and cons of the namespace. Like, so for me, when I was thinking about it, like one of the concerns would be for uh, like a namespace scope resource where if we allow all namespaces to like we allow the connection resource to exist in all namespace, then let's say there is a scenario where user like constraint author A owns namespace A and constraint author B owns namespace B, right? So and they can't see each other's namespace, but they can create connection that eventually exports all the violations, does that pose a security risk? Like, do we think so? This basically boils down to whether or not we think constrained authors are the owners of create or responsible for creating connections versus gatekeeper admin is responsible for creating connections.
I think I guess like with Gatekeeper today, everything is pretty much assuming you're a cluster admin.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty much.
And I mean, by
Yeah.
today's standard, like it's gatekeeper
Yeah.
admin who creates the
I don't
config.
think we really have namespace anything.
We do. We have config resource, which is namespace code.
Yeah, but that's like not really like namespace in a way where you could provide other namespaces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, in that
So
sense,
from
like
that perspective, yeah.
in that sense, the config map we are using right now for connections is also a singleton one where it needs to exist in gatekeeper namespace and it needs to have a specific name in order for it to get reconciled and used.
Yeah. Um,
So then what I thought was, I think it's fine for now to move ahead with the same concept and replace that config map. And if we need to broaden our boundaries, then we can, like instead of one config map, the one connection that we support now, if we do end up supporting multiple, then we can open up, like broaden our boundaries by either introducing flags or pre-constructed array of connection names or whatever, or um, like introducing a mechanism where it's restrictive enough that it doesn't export all the violation all the time and not pose any security risk.
yeah. Yeah, let's just start with cluster scope and we can always revisit later. I think namespace level things could get very complicated if Gatekeeper doesn't have access to certain things, and or vice versa, actually. Um,
Okay.
and just I guess like just for the sake of completeness, right? Like when we talk about the different personas, Gatekeeper, admin versus constraint authors, from a Kubernetes RBAC perspective, they're pretty much the same, right?
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? It's not like we have different RBAC for.
yeah, but I mean, so think about it, right? Like, let's say there is a centralized team which installs Gatekeeper, but individual users can
True.
authorize the constraint in itself, right? So in that sense, it's like two different RBACs.
I mean, yes and no, because like I guess like as a constraint author, if I want to see the status of,
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
again, I'm
If
just
you
saying
have, if you have,
effectively it's the same. Yeah.
yeah,
You could argue in real life they're different people, but when you look at their permissions on the cluster, it's pretty much the same.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So
again, let's start with the cluster scope. I think that would kind of get us some miles out of the feature, right? And then we can always come back if people think that's not good enough.
okay. Or we can, so right now what we are doing is config map and which is namespace scope. So we can do the same thing, but restrict it to
One namespace.
one namespace and one resource.
Mm, yeah, that's another option.
Because I couldn't necessarily find or figure out a specific thing that will encourage us to make it a constraint, like cluster level resource versus the namespace level resource.
Okay. Only, okay, I'm looking at your doc. Okay, only one connection in Gatekeeper is allowed to create connection, and all violations are published via said connection. Only one connection in Gatekeeper is allowed. Why is it only one connection allowed?
Sorry, only one resource.
with
It's the same as right now, right? Like we're only one, like we look at only one config map as we only support one connection right now. It's the same thing, basically. But for like,
okay, you mean like a no name, like you're always looking for that.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what namespace is the config map into the gatekeeper? Okay. Sorry, I should know this.
No.
Uh, yeah, maybe just like basically move from config map to this series.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems like an easy
Yeah.
port. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we make a conscious decision rather than
Yeah,
not.
yeah. I know. Yeah, again, let's start there and then depending on the feedback, because I don't really see I mean, even if you have one connection, right? You could have multiple drivers, different configs, right? Right?
I mean, so yeah, I mean driver and everything is there, but it's just no op at that point, right? Unless you create a actual link in between.
Yeah.
Like for example, uh, if you scroll right now, let's say we merge that disk export PR that we have right now, right? Like at a time, only one connection will exist in Gatekeeper, which can utilize only one backend at a time. So it's not going to be like unless we made that change in the system itself and support multiple connection, it's not going to be that a user will be able to export to Dapper and on disk at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. So it's the equivalent of like again, it's one config map versus many config maps.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think by moving from config map to like a CRD, we could always support more than one CR, right?
Yeah.
In the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start there and it's, yeah.
Cool.
I think that's the easiest thing to do.
So the same thing, namespace code with a specific name,
Yeah.
what we are looking for in Gatekeeper namespace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's just one instance, right? In the future, if you want to
Yeah.
support more, you just look for whatever it's in the cluster. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. And the second question I had was, so I was thinking about what type of data or metrics that we can export, or do we need to export at all? One of which was like successfully published messages per audit run, which can be tallied through like total violations, and then figure out like figure out a way if there was how many violations were not delivered or something like that. Do we want to export that metrics or not? I mean, not right now, but like in future.
I think it will be useful. Yeah. I think it will be useful, but
Okay,
uh,
so I was kind of figuring out graduation criteria. So like that's why I was
mm,
asking. So I'll put it under alpha to
yeah,
beta.
I think having that for at least, yeah, I think for beta would be good. Yeah. Um, and can we also have like gatekeeper metrics for mm, like I guess like are there also like status we could get from the connections, not just hold on, let me think about this. me look at the metrics stuff today. I guess what you just said is not just for like the constraint status, right? It's also for Prometheus metrics.
Yeah. I was talking
Okay.
about not the status of the connection or how many violations. I was just talking about Prometheus.
Okay. I was gonna say that might be also be useful for the status, the constraint status. Even though you're not reporting everything, right? We don't do that
I
because
mean,
you're,
we do it in the constraint status anyway, right? Like total violations.
but not the stream, not how many you've streamed, right? That's new.
Yeah. So it should be on the constraint status or connection status in that sense, like in that case.
Right. Yeah, it's all part of the same status. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying, let's make sure you include there as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'll figure it out whether do we need it under bipod status or direct status. I'll figure it out later.
Do we need what? Sorry.
Like, do we add this field under bipod status or direct status?
Not sorry, bipod or what was the second one?
Under like so, uh, under each status we have bipod status, right? Like, do we add this field under the per pod status or direct status? I think per pod. That makes sense.
Let's see. Um,
Just in case when we add this to validating webhook as well, it's just easier for the respective pod that is reporting that violations to update the respective status under connection to indicate that using this connection, this X pod has exported Y violations.
I mean, today I think the total is under status, not bipod. Bipod is where you have bipod specific things, right? Like especially for audit, it's just one pod, right?
Yeah, but so I'm thinking about what if we end up integrating the same mechanism into webhook as well, like validating webhook.
Yeah. Uh, mhm. Then yeah, then it makes sense to do a bipod. But mm, let me what do we put in audits by sorry, what do we put in trying to look for an
Constraints.
example of bipod and I can't find it.
Here it is. If you go onto the audit page, let me share my screen.
Yeah, there's no bipod. It's just
Oh, under audit, yeah, there is.
it's just status. Again, bipod is for
I think it's under. Okay.
huh? What?
I think bipod is under constraint templates, not in constraint,
That's right. Yes.
because the constraint status only is concerned for audit pod, so it's just a singleton. operation.
Yeah, I think it's any non-singleton operations would have bipod.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. And so anyway, I think this answers your question. Yeah. Okay. So are you pretty good then with this feature, or is it you think it's at a good state where someone can take it and implement it?
I'm noting down like final details on error, like debugging and error logs and few other sections that I have to go through. But then I think we are in pretty good shape to for like to for that such that this can be picked up by others and be implemented.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'm sorry, I got confused. So did we agree upon bipod status, like putting bipod status for connection object or normal status?
No, right? Because you just said bipod is in constraint template.
Yeah, but I mean, what if that's the same argument, right? Like, what if we add this feature to webhook in future? Becomes a multi-pod thing.
What do we? I guess it's because today we don't write anything to constraint status for emission.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, so this is net new, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And
yeah.
I think I'm a little bit more confused. I sometimes feel that we are talking about two different things. I'm talking about status, like status on connection object that we are planning, not introducing anything on constraint status.
Oh, okay. So which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the status that we should have in this CRD that we are planning to introduce
I
for
see,
that.
the status resource.
Yeah, status resource.
Okay.
For that.
Yes. Then yes.
Okay.
Then the status resource isn't the status resource already specific to a pod? I think we create a status resource for each pod, right?
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, you could write it to that status resources status. Because each pod will have their specific status resource. Yeah, sorry for everyone else. This is super confusing.
But then how? So I don't think we use. So I think this will be a net new status ratio resource type as well, right? Like
Hold on. So I think you okay. So there are two things. Just to confuse you a bit more. So constraints and constraint status both have bipod status, right? And that bipod status points to the pod specific status resource.
yeah. Constraint template does, yeah.
Right. So if you just want to write to the status of the constraint or constraint template, then yes, you should just write it in the bipod section of that status field. You're still talking about constraint, right? You're not actually talking about the bipod that is on constraint.
No, it's on constraint template, right? Like constraint, we don't. Let me make sure. This is so confusing.
Hold on, I'm trying to find an example. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying we don't have it in the website, so I need to look in the code. Types. Go. Status. Yeah,
I really wish we have an example. This is really.
yeah, it's.
Oh.
I think by port status is only on constraint template and not on constraint.
Okay. Let me just look at the CRDs. Yeah, that's the easiest thing.
Is there a documentation to a status resource?
Yeah, there is.
Because
Mhm.
yeah, I saw.
Let me put
I
it
was,
in the chat. 1 second.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was reading this, and this is probably maybe it's out of date, probably. But I mean, most likely it's out of date. Um,
Yeah, so I think it's for constraint templates and all the mutators that we have bipod status on. So similarly, we might need a new.
but I think we don't see it in the deployment YAML because remember every constraint is just a CRD, right? That's
Yeah.
why you won't see it in the gatekeepers CRD list, right? Because it's custom, right? But if you look at this design doc, right, it says constraint pod status. So I think that's what you mean, right? Is each constraint will create a constraint pod status.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like, yeah, so under the constraint pod status, you will have bipod. Right?
Uh,
Wait, this is really
each pod will create a constraint pod status for every constraint, right? And that will be accumulated to a bipod status.
mhm. You know what? I don't want to guess. Let me just run that and then
Yeah.
get back to you. I don't want to guess. Because it's possible this dog is really old. So, but either way, right? Like even before we validate this, just to be 100% sure. I think wherever the bipod is, right? We to your point, just add it there. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So sorry to go back and forth on this,
Yeah,
but
no, go ahead. Yeah.
my question was, then in that sense we'll need a new status resource in itself, right? Like how we have it for constraint pod status, mutator pod status, constraint template pod status. It will be like connection pod status.
Yes, that's right. Because we have status for everything.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
that status would have the bipods thing that you could add
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I think like I can figure out how it's generated and everything.
Yeah.
Like, you need to
So
worry about,
without looking at the thing, yes, you're unblocked. Yeah. But now
yeah.
it's bugging me because I want to go see, like, I feel like there's a constrained pot status, but it's just we don't really look.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't really look there. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked in the code site. There is a constraint port status. So
Yeah. That's why
yeah.
it's
In
just
code there is like a, so I'm sure there
that
is
makes
one,
sense.
the constraint status eventually.
Yeah. It's like not easy to find because normally you wouldn't that's not the CRD, right? That's not the name you look for.
Yeah. Okay.
What
I
else?
am
Mhm.
yeah, I am unblocked on this. So maybe I'll finish up with this design doc and we can discuss it and finalize it next week, or I can shoot it up on Slack and then you can look at it, I think. Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, sounds good. Async is always good.
Okay.
That way you don't need to wait.
I posted several things. I know out of time, but maybe you
Okay.
can take a look and see whether several things. One is the OpenID Foundation. It mentioned OPA participating in the Austin interoperable testing.
Mhm.
So I don't know what that means. I think you mentioned OPA is now for authorization. But there's OPA is mentioned in that list.
In that video?
Oh no, it's not a video. It's did I post a video?
Oh, sorry. I could be wrong. In the blog? Oh, I guess
Yeah.
it's also a video. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a video there. Yeah, so you mentioned there's an interoperability between different authorization engines. OPA is listed there. So I don't know
Yes.
what does that mean.
I don't either.
Yeah, because
I
I
mean,
know,
but for what it's worth, like OPA has an authorization webhook.
yeah, maybe that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Omri, my understanding, he's pretty big, and he was working for Microsoft as he said he's one of the guy for behind the directory, error directory. And
Okay.
then, yeah, he's leading that OPA, I believe, authorization interoperability working group there. That's
Okay.
one.
Cool. Sorry. Who are you talking about?
OMRUY, I believe. He's the lead in that group, OpenID Foundation working group.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Anyway, the second one is I've also pasted the news that David It, he's going after next level of abstraction, which is pretty interesting. And so I wonder, have you seen any need for next level abstraction as he talked about in that interview with KFR?
I have not, but I will now. I mean, I work with David on SIGAuth, so I'm
Yeah,
not surprised he's doing this. I just been really busy with other stuff, so I probably missed this.
yeah. I mean, maybe this is a good place to bother you about what you think of these two questions. One is the next abstraction, next level abstraction. The second is why is OPA in that working group anyway? I guess that's the question. Third question, I just came up because you just mentioned the status. I just checked ChatGPT because that's what I use for learning when I don't have a teacher. It says there's no standalone status resource in Kubernetes. However, every Kubernetes resource may include a .status sub resource. So are you? I do see in the documentation you have, it does show a CRD called resource status, right? So is status a resource or sub resource? Why ChatGPT doesn't know about it?
Okay, good question. So there is a status field, which is a sub resource for Kubernetes,
Okay,
right? So every Kubernetes resource will have a sub resource called status,
okay,
which is part of the same object, right? It's just a field, right?
okay, yeah,
But for Gatekeeper, and you can look at the doc I shared, we just happened to actually create a status resource for all of our custom resources.
Okay. Is this special for OPA Gatekeeper? Or they...
It's the way we designed it, and the goal or the rationale behind it is because we want to use that as the mechanism to keep track of the state of all the controllers, right? Because you could have
Okay.
multiple instances of say the gatekeeper validating controller running, right? But you don't want all of them to fight with each other.
I see. So, yeah, I see. So this is at this point it's only for OPA Gatekeeper. They maybe in the future might be used for other type of
Yeah,
resources
I
as
mean,
well, right?
I wouldn't be surprised if other projects or cloud native project have similar things, but maybe they call it different things, right? Because you can call the
Okay.
resource whatever name, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
This is just the way we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a type of next level abstraction he's talking about. Maybe. Yeah. Cool. Right, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
We are on time.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Have
Bye.
a good
Thank you.
day. Bye.